Hey guys, you just finished reading Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, which is an example of a dystopia in literature. We're going to talk a little bit right now about what it means to be a dystopia, what that looks like in literature. Hopefully, in doing that, you'll be able to apply some of what we discussed today to what you just read and then to the Hunger Games, which you're about to read. Okay, so the first question is, what is a dystopia? It's going to help a lot if you already know what a utopia is. Some of you may know that already, but in case you don't, a utopia is a place, a state, or condition that is ideally perfect in respect of politics, laws, customs, and conditions. Okay, you don't need to write all of that down. Here's what I would do. I would find a place in your book, in the Hunger Games, maybe the front cover or the back cover, and I would take these notes inside the book, not on a sheet of notebook paper. Now, if you don't have your own book, then you will want to use notebook paper and you'll want to keep up with it. But because we're going to keep coming back to these notes, it's going to be helpful to have them in your book. Write small because there's a fair amount of them today. Okay, so you might want to pause me to get out your books and kind of get situated and ready for notes. But if you don't need to pause, I'm going to keep moving forward. And here's what I would like you to write. For utopia, you can just write a perfect place. So it's just a place where everything runs smoothly, the world is completely perfect, everything is exactly what it's designed to be. Rarely are you going to see that. So the flip side to a utopia is a dystopia, which don't write all of this. Remember, I'm going to tell you to boil it down. But a dystopia is a futuristic, imagined universe in which oppressive societal control and the illusion of a perfect society are maintained through corporate, bureaucratic, technological, moral, or totalitarian control. Dystopias, through exaggerated worst case scenario, make a criticism about a current trend, societal norm, or political system. So the idea here being that it's a society that appears to be perfect, but is not actually perfect. There's a control that's maintained to keep that appearance up. But if you look just below the surface, it's not perfect at all. In fact, it's complete opposite of perfect. A lot of times authors use this idea of dystopia literature to exaggerate a worst case scenario. So we take something in our society, in American society, and we say, what if this obsession or this tendency or this problem we have, what if it became a totally worst case scenario? In the Hunger Games, one of those things that you're going to see is the concept of reality television. We are obsessed as a nation with reality television. How far will we take that obsession? We'll take it to shows like The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, where you see people crying and terribly depressed because their hearts are broken, and we kind of laugh and look at that. Or we take it to shows like Survivor, where people are you know just pushing their bodies to the absolute limits in order to win a game. We'll take it that far, but in a worst case scenario, would we take it to the point that we're allowing our children to kill each other on television for our enjoyment? So one part of the Hunger Games is that worst case. Let's blow this up into complete proportion. In the lottery, you saw it in how far would they go to maintain population control, if that's what they were even doing. How far will they follow a rule for the sake of following a rule, or a tradition, which is probably more the case in the lottery. So anyway, for dystopia, I would just boil it all down and say a place that appears perfect, but is the exact opposite of perfect. The appearance is maintained through through various methods of control. So a place that appears perfect but is the exact opposite. The appearance is maintained through various aspects of control. So you kind of jot that down. Again, if you need to pause me. Okay, so here's the main meat of today. We were going to discuss what are the characteristics of a dystopian society. So as you're reading literature, here are the things that you need to be looking for to say, all right, am I reading about a dystopia or not? Is this the author's intention or not? And these things should be written down exactly as they appear on the screen. And my suggestion would be to to record them by number, so in a numeric list. That way, if you're coding them in your annotations, you can just put the number, and we'll get into that later. Okay, so number one, propaganda is used to control the citizens of a society. Propaganda is used to control citizens of a society. I would write it down as is. And you guys should know propaganda is any means the government uses to to show their belief systems, maybe. Okay, number two, information, independent thought, and freedom are restricted. Information, independent thought, and freedom are restricted. So people are not encouraged to think for themselves. The government kind of controls what they want people to think and not think. Okay, again, I'm going to keep going. I might be moving a little bit too fast for you guys since I'm not there to see you writing. Just pause as needed. All right, so number three, a figurehead or concept is worshipped by the citizens of the society. So a figurehead or concept is worshipped by the citizens of a society. So you were reading the lottery, you probably saw that, and the idea that they kind of worship this idea of the lottery system. Everybody showed up. It was a ceremony. It was just an idea that was just kind of always done, and maybe that idea of tradition always happening, but why was it happening? In Hunger Games, it's going to look like that's going to be Panem. Okay, in Hunger Games, number three, in Hunger Games, it's going to be the capital, excuse me. All right, so number four, citizens are perceived to be under constant surveillance. So they always feel like someone's watching them. There's this idea of Big Brother who's looking at their every move. You see a lot of that in Hunger Games. So as you see that idea that these citizens believe themselves to be watched or their conversations to be listened to without their permission or without their knowledge, that's going to be one of those evidence of a dystopia. Okay, number five, citizens have a fear of the outside world. They have a fear of the outside world. So you saw that a little bit in the lottery when they were discussing that some of the cities around them no longer took place in the lottery. So you would kind of see that in that concept of like, and they didn't want to participate. They thought that was odd. They thought that was different. There's this fear of what they don't know. You guys probably read The Giver last year in middle school, and so you would see that in The Giver as well. It wasn't that their world was awesome and wonderful, but there was this fear of, but it's all I know, and I'm not sure I want to leave that. You're going to see the same thing in the Hunger Games, right? So, no, the country's not wonderful, and everybody's life isn't perfect, but this is where they get their food. This is where they get their protection, and they're not sure about leaving that. Okay, number six is citizens live in a dehumanized state. So dehumanized meaning that that they aren't treated like humans; they're treated like animals. And you see that in the lottery, and that we're going to stone someone for no really good reason, just because we picked her name out of a hat, right? She wasn't treated like a human. She was treated just kind of like cattle or an animal, or just or she didn't have any inherent value. So you're going to see that in the Hunger Games as well. In the games themselves, the people are dehumanized. All right, number seven, the natural world is banished and distrusted. That's going to be very similar to number five. They have this fear of the outside world, but anything that is like normal and natural, you really can't be trusted, and it's really not allowed. So would be the idea that the country sets up boundaries, and that where they have control, and that outside that control, people are really encouraged, not to trust that and not to go there. I'm sure you can already see that really clearly in chapter 1 of Hunger Games if you've read it already, and if you haven't, we'll be starting that today or tomorrow, so you'll be wanting to look for that in that chapter. All right, number 8. Citizens conform to uniform expectations. Individuality and dissent are bad. You saw that clearly in the lottery, right? So the expectation was that everybody shows up for lottery day and that everybody participates. That's the same. You're going to see those same ideas in the Hunger Games. So we want everyone to be about the same. People are more easily controlled if they're the same. So individual thought or rebellion, definitely not appropriate and not encouraged. All right, number 9, the society is an illusion of a perfect utopian world. So we talked about that a little bit in the last slide, but this idea that it looks like the perfect world, right? It looks like, and you saw that in the lottery when you first started reading. Probably it was folksy. People were talking to each other. They were laughing. They were gathering together. They knew their neighbors. It looked like a place where you would want to be, right? It looked like a happy place, but by the end of that short story, it's not. So same thing, sort of in the Hunger Games, although because a lot of you've probably already read it or know the basic story or you've seen the movie, you kind of let that illusion go. But there's an idea that people are provided for, they are taken care of. The alternative to what the country could be is not as good as what it is. But and certainly the capital wants to keep that idea of a perfect world and that appearance of a perfect world, but we're going to know quickly ourselves as readers that it's not that way. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide, you guys. If you Okay, so now we're going to talk about the types of dystopian controls. Now, you do not need to write everything on the slide, so don't just start writing, try to listen, and then write as needed. Okay, so the first type of control that can be used in any type of dystopian literature is corporate control. So the idea that one or more very large corporations are controlling society through different products, through advertising, through the media. It gives you some examples here of some films that do that. You're going to see some of that in the Hunger Games. In fact, as you see this list, you're going to see that you're going to see more than one type of control in that novel. So it's not a hit or it's not an all or nothing list. You can have pieces of different parts. So for this one, I would probably just write corporate control. And if you think that you're going to forget what that means, add whatever details you need to add. You don't need to include those examples. You're not really going to be tested heavily on this part. This is just to give you an idea of what a dystopian control can look like. Okay, bureaucratic control is the next one. So in this one, society is controlled by mindless bureaucracy through a tangle of red tape, relentless regulations, and incompetent government officials. So that one is the one that probably most fits the lottery. People are just mindlessly following these rules and this tradition that they've had for centuries, but not really thinking about why do we do that or what is that all about. Incompetent government officials. You're going to see that some in the Hunger Games. Didn't really see that in the lottery. It's just too short for that. But again, you can put, bureaucratic control and then whatever you need to put to kind of remember it. But again, you're not going to be tested heavily on this slide, just as more for your own information. All right, so another type of control is technological control. Society is controlled by technology through computers, robots, scientific means. This one is interesting because you've probably seen these movies, The Matrix, The Terminator, and I, Robot. So you're going to see some of that control, you know, just through technology. And you kind of see in those movies for sure that, that doesn't always run perfectly or go well. And there are definite problems with technology. It's an interesting concept for our society today as we use so much technology. So what are we allowing it to control us? You see some technological control in Hunger Games. You're going to see that with some of the methods that the Capitol uses to exert their control over the district. So you want to kind of look for that in the book. But again, you're going to see some of the others as well. Okay, last one, philosophical or religious control. So in this one, society is controlled by philosophical or religious ideology, often enforced through dictatorship or theocratic government. So you're just going to see very similar to like bureaucratic control. You're going to see that there's a kind of a governmental system, in this case, maybe a religious system, that's just controlling the people and forcing them to think what they want them to think. Again, guys, for the notes on these, probably just write the bold words, and then if you need any other details to help you kind of remember what it's all about, you can add them. But all right, so this one you're going to need to know, and I would probably write word for word. this one discusses the dystopian protagonist. So here, this is going to be Katniss in the Hunger Games. Now, Katniss is an evolving dystopian protagonist, so you're not going to see all these traits evident in her um, in the beginning of this book. You may not even see all of them by the end of the book. You're going to see hints of them, but she's an evolving protagonist. So if you read the trilogy, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, then you're going to see all of these in her very clearly. If you've read them all already, they're going to come to mind really quickly for you. You're going to say, oh yeah, I've seen that, I've seen that, I've seen that. But if you're new to The Hunger Games, you're not going to see these as well, but they are really good for you to know. Okay, so there's not very many of them, and just add these to your notes. Okay, so the first one is that the protagonist often feels trapped and is struggling to escape. She often feels trapped in her society and she's struggling to escape. You guys probably saw these also pretty clearly in The Giver when you saw, I can't remember that little boy's name, the protagonist in that one, but you saw, that he started to feel really trapped and that he did try to escape, and did eventually actually escape where he lived. So anyway, number two is that the protagonist questions the existing social and political system. So, people really aren't encouraged to have individual thought and to question these things, but this protagonist is going to start questioning, is this really a perfect society? Is this really how we should be living? Okay, the next one is that the protagonist believes or feels that something is terribly wrong with the society in which she or he lives. So she's going to start to say, this isn't right. This isn't how we should be living. This isn't what our world should look like. She's going to start to realize there's something wrong with this. So for Katniss, there's something wrong with the reaping. There's something wrong with the games. And you're going to see that pretty clearly in this book. So you're going to see pretty clearly that she's beginning to question and say, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is how it should be. Okay, and the last one is that she helps the audience recognize the negative aspects of the dystopian world through his or her perspective. So that does not mean all the time that the character is aware of the problems with the dystopian world, but it does mean that as a reader, we're able to see her perspective, and through our additional knowledge and reading about her perspective, we will be able to see the negative aspects of the world. So, for example, if Katniss may not be able to immediately see all that's wrong with the reaping, but we will be able to see that when we just see her perspective on that situation. So that's going to be, I know that's maybe a little hard concept, and maybe not all of you are totally with me in what I'm saying right there, but I think that as we read, you're going to see how maybe your vision is more clear than the protagonist's vision, which is the goal anyway. The goal for Suzanne Collins is not that Katniss understand everything that's wrong with her world, but that we as readers understand what's wrong with her world